Ape Escape is a game that I've been putting off playing for a long time, for 22 years in fact. My first experience with this game was back in 1999 on a PlayStation official magazine demo disc. However, it wasn't much of an experience, for me at least. You see, this game Ape Escape is one of the first and maybe only PlayStation 1 games to not only make use of the analog stick, but to absolutely require it. That would mean you would need the luxury PS1 controller, the DualShock. If you're younger, you might not remember this, but the original PS1 controllers didn't have analog sticks. They looked like this, which is exactly the same one that I had. So my time with Ape Escape was spent staring at the game, unable to do pretty much anything. But I was so intrigued by this idea and gameplay, which was unfortunately just out of my reach. But now it's literally decades later, I'm now an adult, I have a DualShock controller, and the free time to finally try this game. That's why today I'm going to give my totally blind review of Ape Escape, having never played it before, and tell you what I honestly think about it. But before I do that, I want to give you the story of how this game was born and why it's considered such a classic. After 2 years of development, Ape Escape was first released back in May 31st, 1999 in the US. It was later released in Japan and lastly in Europe on July 2nd, 1999. The game was developed by a company called SCE Japan or Japan Studio, which was a first-party developer for Sony. This company is well known for Ape Escape, but they also developed everyone's favorite game, Knack. That's not a joke. During the early concept stages of Ape Escape, SCE Japan was invited to a development meeting which featured the first look at the DualShock analog controller. At the time, this was new technology coming to the PS1. The creative producer at SCE Japan, Susumu Takasuka, said as soon as he saw this controller, he began thinking of all the ways they could utilize the analog sticks in their game. And from then on, that was the focus of Ape Escape's base gameplay. It would be the first game requiring the use of the DualShock analog controller to play.
One stick could maneuver your character around a fully 3D environment, and the other is used to control the gadgets. The ideas just kept coming.
The very first media coverage of the game was in a tiny blurb in the news section of the official PlayStation magazine. Months later, Ape Escape was given its own spot in the magazine's demo disc upon its release. That disc was the PlayStation Underground Jam-Packed Summer '99 demo disc, that's a mouthful, which, like I said before, was my first exposure to the game. Ape Escape also had some really retro commercials. Commercials like this don't really exist anymore, and I admittedly kinda miss them.
Over 200 apes are on the loose, and it's up to you to stop them. Introducing Ape Escape. You'll use plenty of anti-ape devices, like a stun club, a slingshot.
Ape Escape received critical acclaim when it was released in 1999. A lot of it was attributed to the innovative use of the DualShock controller. Now this is something that might sound weird to people who weren't born in the 90s, but trust me, this was some new technology we had. Many reviewers did mention this control scheme was difficult at first, but quickly got used to it after some playtime. Reading this now, it's actually kind of endearing to think about, given that every modern console game now uses this control scheme, and we don't really think about it. The game was also acclaimed for its music, which was mostly composed by Soichi Terada. He immediately was hired after he submitted a sample of his song Jungle Boogie to SCE Japan. On the other end of the audio was the voice acting, which was not so well received, and we'll get into that during the review. Overall, gaming media outlets agreed that Ape Escape was a fantastic game. IGN, back when I guess they had a better grasp of criticizing games, stated that it was one of the best 3D platformers on the PlayStation. We all know that it had some tough competition, but GameSpot took this a step further and named it one of the best 3D platformers to date. In the end, Ape Escape is a favorite game for many people and considered one of the all-time great PlayStation classics. So what better place to start this review than the story of the game, given that it's literally the first thing you're introduced to during the opening credits. So there's this monkey named Specter, right? He's the top act at Monkey Park, which is basically some kind of cruel zoo where monkeys put on shows for people. So Specter's just chilling in his cage one day and finds this helmet called the Peak Point Helmet, which makes anyone who wears it extremely smart. Smart enough to break out of his cage, free all of his monkey bros, and start a plot to take over the world. As this is going on, your character, Spike, and his friend Jake are running to the professor's lab. The professor just created a time machine, and Spike and Jake are very casually talking about this like it's not some kind of reality-shattering existential crisis device. But your plans get kicked square in the balls as you reach the lab. You come into the professor's lab and see that Specter has taken it over and is going to use the time machine to rewrite history and form a new world where monkeys rule. Specter activates the time machine, and you and Jake get brought back to the past, with the professor and his assistant Natalie left behind in the lab, back in the present. So now, as Spike, you're tasked with stopping this evil plan and capturing the evil monkeys along the way. So that's the basic premise of the game. There's not much to it, but it's enough. And I'd argue that a lot of games around this time didn't really have super fleshed out stories. But that's the beauty of it. So many modern games are full of long dialogue and lore, which can be great, but I feel there's a lack of fun games with nice little stories like this. It doesn't go out of its way to have any twists or turns, it's pretty straightforward, and doesn't get bogged down with explaining itself. You might ask questions like, how did that helmet get in Specter's cage? How did the professor make a time machine? How does time travel even work in this universe? Are Natalie and the professor sleeping with each other? The answer to all these questions is, who cares? And I find that refreshing. Ape Escape drops you right in and focuses on the best parts about it. You beat monkeys with a lightsaber, and you capture them in a net. That's it, and it's great. But what's even better is the voice acting, and I mean that very not literally because the voice acting sucks.
Specter. Jake.
Very good. Then let's get going.
Right.
Hold on.
I've been waiting for this for a long time. This is just between you and me.
Hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? Let go of me!
It kind of reminds you of the voice acting in Tumba 2, which was also not great.
A treasure?
Here it is. This is it.
I'm not sure if this is a product of the era, and maybe video game voice acting didn't really have a large talent pool to pick from, since it wasn't as developed as it is now, but games around this time didn't have the best VOs. I'm sure there were some on the PS1, but from memory, none really stand out to me. Regardless, Ape Escape's voice acting just has a certain charm to it. I'll fully admit that it's just my nostalgia playing on me for games from this era, and I would probably criticize a modern game that had voice acting like this, but for me, it just somehow fits, and it's guaranteed to give you some laughs as you play through. So that's where the game starts, and it drops you right in pretty quickly, and I'll touch on the end of the story later in the review, so spoilers ahead for this over 2-decade-old game. Ape Escape's first level starts you off back in the past when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and your very first mission is to capture 3 monkeys. To accomplish this, you're given 2 gadgets, this stun baton that looks like a lightsaber, and your monkey catching net. You switch between your items with the buttons, jumping is assigned to R1, and you move with the left thumbstick and swing the saber or the net with the right thumbstick. As you see, controlling Spike was not easy for me at first. I'm cursed with the knowledge of modern gaming control schemes. Normally you'd move forward and back with the left thumbstick, and turn or direct yourself with the right. Then your weapon or gadget would probably be the right trigger. So these controls were different for me. I won't say they were bad. Somehow it still didn't feel dated. The way that everything works together does make sense as you go along, and they were extremely innovative for how they designed the gadgets and vehicles around the use of the DualShock. And you're given more gadgets as the game progresses to help you get through each level. There's a flying device that activates as you rotate the stick, a monkey radar where you turn the radar dish with the right stick, a hula hoop that you could spin around and makes you invulnerable and run fast, a slingshot that mimics how a real slingshot would work by pulling back and letting go to fling projectiles, and my favorite, the RC car, which can attack enemies but can also be used to get into tough to reach places and activate switches for you. All of these work really intuitively with the DualShock. The RC car is probably one of my favorites just because I like how you can move your character around while also driving the car. It's pretty cool to use in practice. The only thing I wish is that the item selection was more modernized with an item selection wheel. Instead, you have to hit select, pause the game, bring up the items, map it to a button, then unpause. It's kind of annoying. The vehicles were also a welcome addition to make use of the controls. There's a rowboat you can use in some sections that behaves and controls like a real rowboat, being able to move each oar independently. Then there's the tank. I'm not sure if anyone else who played this had similar issues, and you can let me know in the comments below if I just suck, but the tank was, for whatever reason, extremely difficult to control. Each stick controls each track on the left and the right. That control scheme makes sense, but the tank just seemed too fast and twitchy. I mean, just look at how ridiculous I look trying to control this thing. But luckily, you were able to control the speed by pressing up lightly on each thumbstick. I did eventually get used to it, but it was definitely a pain at first. Overall, the controls were fun, and you could tell that the developers really had a lot of fun thinking of new ways they could use each for each scenario. Where I can't give as much credit is the camera. Going into Ape Escape, I had an idea that this would be an issue. A lot of older games had problems with camera movement, and unfortunately, Ape Escape is no exception. There were some sections that were more frustrating than they needed to be, just due to fighting the camera. Sometimes it snaps in weird directions, other times it just couldn't be rotated at all. Thankfully, this wasn't constant and it didn't hurt my enjoyment of the game. So as you go through Ape Escape, you travel through time and through a handful of zones, each with 3 levels. The zones vary pretty nicely, starting with the dinosaur zone called the Lost Land, the Mysterious Age filled with monkey ruins, Oceania, which is a nice beach with, well, an ocean, New Friesland mimicking the Ice Age, Medieval Mayhem where you travel through medieval Japanese temples and castles, and finally Futurama where you get to experience levels in a future ruled by monkeys. As you can tell, there's a nice variety of zones here, and each zone and level gets more complex as you progress, which forces you to use your gadgets in different ways to traverse the environment and catch monkeys. The art and textures in this game are very obviously old, and this may once again be my nostalgia playing with my millennial brain here, but the graphics are nice. They're charming in a way that I feel only people who played games in the PS1 era can really appreciate, and that's not saying others wouldn't enjoy this. It looks pretty good for a PS1 game, and the cartoony look of everything really fits with the whole fun aspect of the game. But the main focus of this game is catching apes, and you will spend a lot of time doing that because each level you're tasked with catching a set number to progress to the next level. Once you hit the set number of monkeys to capture, you automatically complete the level and are sent back to the hub zone. I kinda wish it didn't bring you right out though, because there's always more monkeys to catch. For example, the level might have 10 total monkeys, but to complete the level you only need 5. Once you capture 5, you're getting teleported out of there. It would have been nice to be able to keep running around and explore and then teleport back when you'd like, but this mechanic does give you some replayability since you'll be forced to go back and replay each level if you want to 100% the game. A nice little touch that I appreciated was the developers adding stats and mini bios for each monkey. They were all hilarious too. You can use the radar to lock onto a monkey and then hit L2 to enter the live monkey cam and be given info on said monkey. Something they didn't have to add, but I'm glad they did. And what's better is the monkey book. Once you're back in the hub world, you can view it and it'll give you the stats and bio of each monkey you captured. There's also a sneak mechanic in the game, and higher level monkeys will notice you way easier than a beta blue pants monkey would. You can walk slowly, or you can crawl to try to conceal yourself, or go into this fetal position thing and they will almost never see you. The sneak mechanic works pretty well in situations when you get the opportunity, or you can just play like me and run at them like a madman swinging your net. I like how you get the opportunity to play this as you want. It's not an open world, but you can attack each scenario with your gadgets in different ways, and some levels do have slightly more open areas that you could explore, and you're given new gadgets pretty frequently as you play the game. To add on to the gameplay, there's a zone called Dimension X. So remember that guy Jake who was your friend? Well, it turns out he got mind controlled by Specter somehow, and you have to encounter him in Dimension X where he challenges you to a race. These are just foot race minigames. It's a nice change of pace while you're playing though. As you get towards the end of the game and getting close to beating Specter, you'll have more mini boss encounters. I really enjoy these even though they were pretty few and far between, with being most safe for the end of the game. Final zone Specter Land really ramped up the difficulty. It certainly wasn't impossible by any means, but some parts were pretty frustrating. Again, mostly from just fighting the camera. And a lot takes place in this final zone. You save the professor and his assistant who just complains the whole time.
What have you been doing all this time? Let's go, we've got to find them.
Okay, I mean, I literally just saved your life though, but whatever. Then you also fight Jake and save him from his mind control. And finally, after traversing through Specter's castle, you'll face him in a 2-stage boss battle where he goes into a giant ape robot. The fight certainly wasn't overly hard, and it had some fun mechanics, and I did enjoy it. It felt pretty fair, unlike some older games where boss battles could be painful. Once you beat Specter, you'll trigger the final cutscene where Specter is pretty much begging for his freedom, saying he'll never go back to the zoo. It's actually kinda sad if you think about it. He was enslaved and just didn't want to be held captive and be forced to perform for everyone. But not to end on a really frigged up dark note, Specter actually does escape. I wasn't expecting this. I knew that there would be more Ape Escapes in the series, but I didn't think the first game would end with the main boss escaping. It makes me think the developers knew this game would be popular and were leaving the door open for sequels down the road. And hey, there actually are sequels to this game, which who knows, maybe I'll play them sometime. Overall, Ape Escape is a fantastic, fun game, and to me, this is really a look back into a time when games were made by passionate developers and not just huge cash grabs. The passion is felt all throughout the game, from the innovative use of the DualShock controller, the bright graphics of each level, the great music and sound effects, and all the way to the core gameplay and ideas. But besides all that, it's simply a fun game. Running around and catching monkeys in a 3D platformer is something you could sit down with and just have fun. If you're looking for one of those games that gives you a nice, warm, cozy feeling, one of those games that you can play on a day where you're not doing anything and there's a nice calming rain outside, then try this one. Not to get too preachy, but you're doing yourself a disservice to not experience one of the great all-time classics. And after getting to play this for the first time, I finally understand why Ape Escape gives people such fond memories. Now, everything I just said wrapping up here might seem like a boomer moment, like I'm living in the past and saying, well, they just don't make games like this anymore. But you have to admit, there is a grain of truth to it. Not once did it cross my mind that I could purchase a new saber color with my monkey points or have to buy some DLC pack. I simply play the game. And I'm not looking at this through the rose-colored glasses because I never played it. So in the end, I think Ape Escape exists as a nice window into the past. It's rough around the edges and frustrating at times, but it's fun and all ages would enjoy this. And that's my review of Ape Escape. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and if you never picked this one up before, I highly recommend it.